Welcome to InnerGLOW, the podcast that helps you to ditch anxiety, judgment, stress, and self-doubt, and instead embody ease, confidence, flow, abundance, and self-love. I'm your host, Bhavna Meg, mindset and energy coach, and founder of Stepping Into You. I work with individuals just like you on emotional, mental, and energetic levels to help you to fall in love with yourself and glow from the inside out. This is episode 5. Today we're going to be talking about death and encounters with death. And I'll share with you one of the experiences that I've had and the mark that it's left with me. As always, there's a tip that's all wrapped up in allowance and trust and the letting go of the fear of death to allow you to begin to live more. Listen all the way to the end to learn how to do this. I've been raised with the knowing that death is a natural and necessary part of life. I was in high school when I attended my first death rites ceremony where I saw my aunt's dead body, who'd sadly passed away. It was explained that attending these ceremonies is a sacred part of my culture and a blessing for oneself, but also in releasing that loved one's spirit onto their next life or as part of ascension to God. I have since encountered more deaths and participated in more death ceremony rites. The experience that I'll be sharing with you today is from my early 20s when I was working in a supermarket. It was a normal Saturday, and there was a call out for a first aider to the customer service desk at the entrance of the store on the PA system. And there was a bit of a rush, and I was being told to go out to the car park. And there was a large gentleman who'd been pulled out of his car, and it was evident that he'd had a heart attack. Another customer had actually seen him in his car with his head bowed over on his way in to do a shop, and he was still in the same position when this particular customer exited to go back to his car. And there was drool coming down the side of his face, so he'd come back into the store to seek assistance. By the time I made it out there, the store manager had already pulled this individual out of his car, and myself and a colleague, so I was one of the first aiders for the store, and my colleague used to be a first aider, and he supported me in doing mouth-to-mouth and CPR. This was the very first time that I had done mouth-to-mouth and CPR. My colleague had a lot more strength, so he was administering the chest compressions whilst I was doing the mouth-to-mouth. And the paramedics, the ambulance had been called. Surprisingly enough, I was in autopilot. I remembered everything from my training and what I was supposed to do, how I was supposed to use the equipment. But in every single moment, I was doubting myself. I was doubting whether it was working. I was doubting whether or not he was alive. I was doubting whether we should keep going. The first paramedic on scene arrived in a car and was on his own and took over with the mouth pump and mask. And I took over from my colleague to do the chest compressions, but I absolutely did not have the capacity or the strength to do the chest compressions to the depth at which they needed to be done. And the store manager actually jumped in to support the paramedic. Whilst that was happening, an ambulance arrived, and there were 3, I think, paramedics in the ambulance, and then the 4th one who was already on scene. And they were working on the gentleman on the ground in the car park. And then when the ambulance arrived, they got him onto the gurney and into the ambulance so they could use the defibrillator and the other tools that they had, whatever it was that they were doing. Myself and my colleague, once we'd both been relieved, we just stood there in absolute silence watching the continued efforts that were taking place in front of us. And I just asked my colleague, "Are you okay?" And his response was, "I don't know." And he asked me, "Are you okay?" And I said, "I don't know." And I couldn't feel how I was feeling, which is probably the most disconnected I can remember myself being with my emotions. I guess there's an element of shock associated with that when we go into a state of shock, particularly in emergency situations. There is a level of autopilot, so the ability to feel can switch off. Perhaps it was the adrenaline as well, allowing that autopilot state to take place. Once the ambulance actually left with the sirens on, and the deputy manager of the store had said to my colleague and I in a reassuring way that, well, they've left blues and twos, that means that there's still hope. Otherwise, they wouldn't have put the siren on. So I felt a sense of hope in that moment that maybe this gentleman would be okay. Perhaps what we did helped. And both myself and my colleague, we've gone back up to the staff room just to have a little sit down and some water and decompress, I guess. Neither of us had ever done anything like that before. So we were trying to talk about what had happened and express how we were feeling, but there really was just nothing there. There was just no feeling. There was no words that we could find to describe our experience. The paramedic that was first on scene, the first responder, had come back to the store a short while later, whilst my colleague and I were still up in the staff room, and had expressed to the duty manager, who then fed back to us. Unfortunately, the gentleman had not made it. He had passed on, but we both had done a really good job in the way that we administered first aid, and that if 4 paramedics with all of the tools and equipment within the ambulance couldn't save him, then there really, really wasn't anything either myself or my colleague could do. And there was that wondering, well, what if we'd been able to be there sooner? What if I was able to do better breaths? What if I was not using the equipment correctly? What if chest compressions were better? And these were some of the questions that rattled around in my head. But needless to say, what the paramedic had come back and reported back to the duty manager, which we were then told, definitely created a sense of peace around it, even though we were still in a state of, I certainly was still in a state of shock. Before we continue with the next part of the show, if what I've shared with you today is resonating with you, leave a review. It goes a long way to help share the love with others who are going through the same things and would benefit from the tips and tools to turn on their inner glow. Another way to share the love is by making a donation at patreon.com/stepping into you to share your love with me and with others. Now, to experience something like that, literally staring death in the face, fair enough, it wasn't my own, but being in such close encounter with someone who is, I guess, in that situation had already passed, and we were trying to revive and bring him back to life. One can only ponder on mortality and what is life, and what if that was me? What have I done? What have I achieved? And this has the potential to create so much fear. It has the potential to create worry and anxiety about whether we're doing what we are supposed to be doing, whether we've experienced life enough to be able to say that we actually lived, whether we are doing everything that we possibly can to live a life without regret. These are really big questions. They're mammoth questions. And to really think about them in a way that is healthy, that's not fused and infused with worry and fear, takes a lot of effort. Now, why does it take a lot of effort? It takes effort because there's a sense of acceptance that needs to be created first around what death is. So many people have a fear of death, and as a result, this drives the way that we behave and engage within life, because we're afraid of dying, and our decisions on things that are around our mortality become a lot more fear-based. If I died, what would happen to my family? What would happen to the mortgage? Who's going to pay this? Who's going to pay that? Who's going to look after this person? What's going to happen to my house? What's going to happen to my bank account? What's going to happen to my things? We worry about all of those things when we think about mortality and the end of our lives. In that state of fear, we lose our ability to think critically and think creatively. And in this state of fear, we lose our ability to truly live and make choices for ourselves that are about living. We start to choose and make choices that are about avoiding dying. And that's not what we're here for. We're not here to be in this state of constant worry about dying. We're here to experience life. We're here to experience all of life's wonders and joys and complexities and challenges and play. Okay, let's move on to the tip for today. Today's tip is around moving into a state of acceptance and trust. When you let go of the fear of death, you begin to live more. There can be a range of emotions that you are experiencing around dying and death, ranging from fear to panic to worry to anxiety to terrified about how you might even die. As you'll know from previous episodes, creating awareness around the way we're feeling and our perceptions and beliefs around situations is absolutely the first step to allow us to transform these particular states of our current being into something that is much more supportive to the life we want to live. We're going to do the same in this tip and do so by doing a body scan. So when you're thinking about dying and death, you're going to start doing a scan from the top of your head, slowly working your way all the way down to the tips of your toes. It's really important that you take your time and go steadily and notice in your body where you're holding any tension or discomfort or dis-ease around death. Once you've identified these sensations of discomfort, dis-ease, or tension in your body in relation to death and dying, you can start to transform them. You can start to transform them using techniques that I would use with clients in my one-on-one sessions or in group sessions. Alternatively, you can do an exercise at home which utilizes the breath. When you're finding discomfort, tension, or dis-ease in your body around death and dying, use your breath and guide it to these spaces with the intention of transforming it into a state of acceptance and trust. You can hold any other intention that you would like: peace, non-attachment, calm, lightness, whatever intention feels good for you, whatever energy feels good for you to replace the discomfort, dis-ease, and tension that you're experiencing. Think about the emotional states that you're experiencing. So if you're experiencing terrified, perhaps coming into a state of peace is appropriate for that. If you're experiencing fear, perhaps the emotional state is love instead of fear. If you're experiencing worry, perhaps instead it would be helpful to experience calm. The body scan technique is an incredibly powerful way to create awareness around what's happening in your body and where you're storing emotions in your body around various things that are going on in your life. That's all for today. Be sure to let me know how you get on with that technique. I'd love to hear from you. And join me next week for episode 6, Liberating My Vagina, where I'll be talking to you about liberating them from the shame and trauma that's held within them and our uterus. Thanks for joining me today, and be sure to subscribe at steppingintoyou.com/InnerGLOW so you don't miss any glowing possibilities. And if you'd love to support InnerGLOW, you can make a donation at patreon.com/InnerGLOW. Sending you love, hugs, and magic.